am Dr. Carol Crouch. I'm the state travel liaison for NRCS, and it's been an honor to be asked again to present at the ITEC conference this year. The topic that we're going to cover today is conservation efforts, and many of you know that NRCS has a lot of partners, and working with Karen and the Planning Committee, a couple of the topics that they wanted us to talk about today is actually feral swine and climate change. And then we also have included some of our partners to also update us on some programs and how ag statistics is important for tribes to be able to have access and utilize. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gary O'Neill. Gary is the state conservationist for NRCS here in Oklahoma. Gary?
Thanks, Carol. Is it here all right, Troy? Okay. Thank you, ITEC, for giving us a chance to give a little update, and appreciate that. NRCS Conservation Agency, hopefully you're familiar with some of our services, and that happens locally at our local field offices where we're co-located with other USDA agencies and also conservation districts. And we have a lot of different programs that can provide assistance, financial assistance, but some of the focus today is on climate. So I wanted to mention a couple that we don't talk about sometimes, and that is our small stream upstream watershed program. We work with conservation districts and the Oklahoma Conservation Commission to maintain and look after 2,107 flood control structures, which has a huge impact on some of the climate issues. But we're also rehabilitating some of those structures, and we're also working with sponsors to build some new ones. So there is funding for that program, the PL 566 program, and there's some great opportunities when you start talking about climate mitigation within that program. The other one I wanted to mention is the Emergency Watershed Program. And as we have extreme weather events, which it seems like every week we're having some rainfall event where we get 3-4 inches of rain in an hour somewhere. EWP is a program that we work with sponsors, primarily county commissioners, but we can also work with tribes as well on protecting roads and bridges and infrastructure. And that assistance can start at our local office as well. We can request funds, go out and take a look at it, and we've done a number of those projects over the years, and I wanted to just emphasize that program is out there. We've got several ongoing right now, and every time we get a big event, we get an opportunity to submit some projects for that program as well. And it's emergency watershed protection to protect roads, bridges, and infrastructure. So I wanted to mention those two programs with the focus on climate. Looking forward to our discussion today. We've got some great things going on in the area of conservation and some great partners. So I just wanted to be brief with that welcome, and thank you for the opportunity. And Carol, I'll turn it back to you and we'll go through the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary, for that introduction. And moving on the agenda, the next topic that we're going to share valuable information with you is on the feral swine. So at this time, we'll have two speakers that will be sharing their screen, and that is Scott Balls. Scott is with USDA Animal Plant and Health Service, another umbrella of the USDA. So with that, I'm going to let Scott begin his presentation, and he will be sharing his screen with you.
Scott, we can only see, it's really small on your screen. You might try maximizing it. That's better.
There you go. Not getting your voice, Scott. Not hearing you.
Scott, I just unmuted you.
Okay, you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's good to be here. The 2018 Farm Bill. Oh, by the way, I'm the state director with USDA APHIS Wildlife Services here in Oklahoma, and also joining the meeting is Kendra Cross. She's the assistant state director here for the last about year and a half. 2018, the Farm Bill authorized funding for NRCS and APHIS to approach some feral swine projects. So in Oklahoma, we decided on 2 areas to initially for our pilot projects. And what we wanted to demonstrate is not to move into a high density area and just remove some pigs, but then they fill back in right behind us. What we wanted to demonstrate is that we can, if we throw enough money at these things, we can suppress them in some areas and then keep them suppressed. So as I move forward, we'll talk about it. This map here shows, it's kind of an old map. The populations really have moved northward as far as the brown and tan goes. But this is an idea of about 10 years ago where we were. Can advance it, let's see. There we go. So feral swine are invasive species with huge upswing in numbers. Their populations increase, exponentially when you reach a point. Feral swine cause about $1.5 billion estimated annually in damage and management cost. And the damage affects agriculture, natural resources, private landowners, culturally significant areas, and human health and safety, among other things. So, and they've been in the news. There's an article that come out of the Oklahoman about what we're trying to do with pigs and some more about their density. So APHIS Wildlife Services here in Oklahoma, we're also a joint program with Oklahoma Department of Ag, Food and Forestry. So we have a combination of federal and state employees under the same mission, and are managed by USDA here out of Oklahoma City. And once again, we protect agriculture, property, human health and safety, and natural resources. This map right here is a map of our districts, which is the green counties are our western district. The tan counties are the northeastern district. The blue, the southeastern district. And then the red shaded counties are what we call the metro district. And that's primarily all urban area and urban type work. Although we do remove a lot of pigs out of the metro. So once again, damage occurs to crops, pasture, food plots, lawns, water sources, native plant species, including threatened and endangered. They cause problems with erosion, levees, even have people hit them on the runway before, endangered aviation. They root up roads. There's all sorts of stuff that they do that cost us. In other words, feral swine are kind of the perfect storm. Whatever they do is negative to somebody or something. So we've spent a ton of money studying damage and disease, and it's proven fact feral swine are a devastation to the landscape. So now what we're trying to do is focus on utilizing multiple methods or the toolbox approach to reduce feral swine damage in overall populations. So we kind of have 2 approaches to reducing feral swine. One is the damage control approach. And this is a small landowner or resource owner. It's basically a small area. It's the guy that's got a section of corn, and we can move in there and help reduce the damage on his place, but perhaps not be very effective on the overall population in the area. So what we're really trying to focus ourselves on nowadays is population control. And all this means is we try to pool up as much land as we can to cover a bigger area, just make a bigger footprint in reducing. And when we can reduce those numbers in those bigger footprints, what we do is reduce damage to everybody and for a longer period of time. I can give you an example of when I was in Mississippi. We had a guy with 400 acres of soybeans, and he could kill 300 or 400 pigs a year, and he always had the same amount of damage because his neighbors wouldn't participate. But we finally got everybody on the same sheet of music, and got to where then he was only having to deal with, less than 100 hogs a year and had far less damage because we were affecting the population on the outside. So it's kind of like everything falls towards the middle. If you just make a little hole in the middle, it just refills too quick. So the 2018 Farm Bill initially called for 2 pilot projects in Oklahoma. And one of these is what we call the Red River Project, and it's composed of Cotton County, Tillman, Jackson, and Harmon. And then the other one was K County. And you wonder why K County? Well, K County is a county that has a small pig population, but they're coming up the water source of the Arkansas River. And what we want to demonstrate there is just when we really lay the wood to them up there, we're being effectual, and we'll see long-term benefits. So, and then more funding was available. So we added 2 more projects, and basically these just connect onto the original 2. In the Southwest, that being Roger Mills and Beckham counties. And then the other one adjoins K County, and that's Osage and Pawnee. And the intent of the pilot project is to demonstrate that with robust funding aimed directly at feral swine control, we can have a positive effect. And here's a map of the counties that are the 2 pilot projects right now. And once again, the concept here is basically trying to set the edge. If we can set the edge and get those numbers in control, then we'll start moving inward and working as we go, instead of trying to start in the middle and just working yourself to death in a hole that you keep refilling. So since we started in late 2019 was when APHIS began this calendar year, well, we've removed 14,243 pigs from the 9 pilot counties. And this is through an integrated approach with aerial activities, ground control, and trapping efforts. We've conducted feral swine removal on approximately 2 million acres of private and public property. And since we began the project, we've verified $2.5 million in damages to agricultural resources, property, and natural resources. And this pie chart here will show you how we've removed the pigs. As you can see, aerial operations is by far the most. Then trapping is the green, firearms the blue. And really what we've run into here as a state program, across the state, we're about 50-50 trapping and aerial activities. Here, we've run into a lot of landowners who would rather us fly than trap. So that's the reason why our aerial numbers are so much higher. Is we have a lot of landowners that'll agree to the helicopter coming in, but not so much the trapping. And then in conclusions, what we know is we need to continue funding these programs to keep ourselves in good shape. And a good example I can give you is Tillman County. Tillman County was one of our highest damaged counties for years, and we had a lot of complaints because of all the irrigated corn down there. And since we've been able to spend this money and expand our efforts in that county, this year is the first year we've had virtually no complaints of damage to corn. So that demonstrates we're being effective. And then current laws and regulations will impact the success of full eradication. As long as there's monetary gain in having wild pigs around, there's going to be some people that don't want us to get rid of them. And then current research is being conducted for improving trapping and toxicant use. I know the toxicant trials are going on right now in Alabama and Texas, and the results are looking very promising. This is the second round of trials. And then pilot project and other trapping efforts throughout the state continue to be successful in reducing the amount of damage. This is not the only place we're doing pig work. We've got roughly 50 employees, and 40 of those are actively engaged in feral swine about 75% of the time. So as a state program goes, we're on track this year to probably remove about 23, maybe 25,000 head of feral swine out of the state. And if that's the case, it'll be our best year and so far. But we're really working hard on, we're not really trying to improve or increase personnel as much as we're trying to improve efficiency by purchasing what we call smart traps. And we've now got 4 helicopters versus 1. So our numbers are going to continue to go up to hopefully they start going the other direction. That's what we're looking for. But with that, I can take any questions.
Okay. Do we have any questions or for Scott? Just to add a little bit to Scott's presentation is I've worked closely with Scott because we've had several tribes that are actually having problems with feral hogs on their tribal trust land. So at the end of the webinar today, we will be providing Karen with all of our PowerPoints, contact information, so that you will get that in an email, so you will know how to reach all of our speakers and have a copy of those presentations. So I just want to encourage you, if you're a tribe, Scott and his staff are also available to assist you as well. So Scott, I think you have a new assistant. Is Kendra on? Would you like to introduce her or just provide her contact information in the bundle of information that will go out?
Yeah, she's on in the other office. So Kendra, you want to introduce yourself? Or could you not hear me?
Okay. Well, we'll catch up with her in a little bit, and I'll also have her contact information. So moving on with our presentations, our next speaker is Lisa Knopf. Lisa is with the Oklahoma Conservation Commission, and you had Scott shared with you that there were 2 projects going on here in Oklahoma. The one that Scott shared with you is actually assisting in the removal of that, and they are also working closely with the Oklahoma Conservation Commission with funding that was also made available out of the same funding pool for feral swine. So at this time, I'm going to let Lisa introduce herself, and she's going to share with you how our partners are coming together to address this invasive species. Lisa?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks, Troy. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Lisa Knopf Owen. I'm the Assistant Director for the Oklahoma Conservation Commission. And we are responsible as an agency for oversight of the 84 conservation districts in Oklahoma and work in many natural resource program areas, one of which is now through this partnership program with feral swine. So one of the things that you'll see are several maps here that are very similar to the ones that you saw in Scott's presentation. I think we have snagged those from the same places. And some of these are older maps that you'll see that these are several years old, and we can pretty much guarantee that there are feral swine in pretty much every county in Oklahoma, and I'd be shocked if you could find a county that didn't have any in Oklahoma. But as you can see, some of these maps are starting to get rather dated. And as Scott mentioned, several of our challenges is the population growth of feral swine in how they reproduce so quickly and effectively that if you don't reduce the population significantly, you're never going to make a dent in the growing concern that you have with the amount of feral swine. So you can see what happens over time. Crop damage is one of the largest concerns that Oklahomans have with feral swine. You mentioned Tillman County in corn, Caddo County in the watermelon crops, Grady County, all of those. The grazing problems that you have once you get your ground rototilled by feral swine, it makes it hard to get grasses reestablished. And for our folks, that one of the things that our agency is a huge proponent of is soil health practices and no-till. And if you have feral swine come into your place trying to no-till on a field that has had them come through, can be extremely difficult. And so the peanut crops, watermelon crops, and then there's also the issues. We're the lead agency in the state of Oklahoma for water quality. And we all recognize that feral swine like water bodies. They like to move up and down water corridors. And so that's a component of our project, which we'll talk a little bit about here. So 10 states across in the first round of this grant project were awarded projects, which Oklahoma was one of those. I can tell you that this all occurred right at the start of the pandemic, which really caused us some challenges. The progress to date, I can update. We have hired 2 technicians to work in these project areas. One is based in Tillman County, the other is based in Pawnee, to cover those 2 projects. And they are working with Scott's folks right now, and we are, I'm hoping, days away from having a state contract where we can order traps, which is great. The Kaw and the K County and Kaw Lake project, when the second round of funding expanded, we were able to add Pawnee and Osage to this, but you can see that Kaw Lake was the focus of that program. And so then it expanded into a bit of a larger region into Osage and Pawnee, where with Pawnee being one of the larger areas of population that we've been having to deal with. The other thing you'll see on this map is part of our project is to be the water quality monitoring sites that we're going to be looking at. We've got data from 15, 20 years back of what has impaired water bodies in some of these areas. And then once we implement some significant trapping efforts, we'll go back through and monitor those sites and hopefully see an improvement in some of the turbidity as well as the bacterial loads that we find in those streams. The Red River project is long, and 4 big counties that we started with. Like I said, we've got a new technician there housed in Tillman County, and you can also see some of the other areas of interest that we have in that area. Hackberry Flat, there's several wildlife management areas that we'll be working with in that area. And then as we expanded it, it moved on up into Roger Mills and Beckham, where we have additional water monitoring data that we'll be working on there as well. Part of the project that one of the biggest portions of our project, besides the trapping efforts, will be assessing the damage so that we can load that into a national database to get a much better handle on how much damage is actually being caused by feral swine. We have a lot of anecdotal data, but not really documented data. And so that's some of the work that our folks are doing, as well as the pre and post stream monitoring, hopefully to evaluate improvements in water quality. And then another big portion of our project will be the training and outreach opportunities so that we can educate landowners on the effectiveness of trapping and providing information on conservation practices and programs that could address natural resource concerns once to help recover and improve some of the damage that they've had. COVID has changed how we've, as you can see here with the webinar that we're doing today, it's changed how we've been doing training and outreach. I really hope that we can get back to more effective in-person outreach opportunities in some of these areas very soon, because I believe with landowners, one-on-one, face-to-face, small group, however we can do it, would be more effective, especially if they can see how to effectively use some of these trapping methods. These are the damage assessment data sheets that we're working on, trying to, through Texas A&M Wildlife and Fisheries. They are the collectors of the data. We'll be providing that to them from our boots on the ground that we have collecting the information. These pilot projects also have many side partners that have signed on to help us out, along with APHIS and ourselves and NRCS. You'll see here many of our traditional partners are very interested in trying to improve some of the feral swine challenges that we have. So so we've got that project going, and then in some other commission efforts for feral swine concerns, every conservation district several years ago received some manual trap gates, and those are available through the local districts, and you can find their contact information on the commission's website. Also, through our state cost share program, we've funded 5 different conservation districts with the ability to purchase a smart trap, electronic traps. You'll see those listed there. Pushmataha is located in Antlers. South Caddo is in Anadarko. North and West Caddo went together in Hinton and Fort Cobb to share an electronic trap. And then recently, we approved purchase for Marshall County and Bryan County in southern Oklahoma. So hopefully you'll see those traps being put to use in those areas as well. And in conclusion, I want to say that after all the work that APHIS has done on this effort and that we're starting to get into ourselves, we've come to the conclusion that you can't hunt or barbecue your way out of the feral swine problem, that it's going to take a very concerted effort to eliminate as many of these animals as we can so that we can see improvements in wildlife habitat, water quality, crops, and agriculture. So with that, I'd be happy also to answer any questions that folks have, but you can also reach out to me with the contact information from the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. And if we get questions, of course, we will forward those on to you as well. And like we've mentioned several times, you will get the PowerPoints and contact information in a bundle of information provided to ITEC staff. So moving on our agenda, the next topic that we were asked to present on has to do with climate change. So with that, I'd like to reintroduce Mr. Gary O'Neill, State Conservationist for NRCS, and he's going to update you on some initiatives that NRCS has taken regarding climate change. Gary?
Thanks, Carol. And I'll just be real brief. After the president signed the executive order in January on addressing climate change and issues, USDA did publish in the Federal Register a notice to collect input from producers, but also organizations That ran from the middle of March to the end of April. And over 2,700 comments were received by 2,100 different private citizens and over 500 organizations. So it received a lot of interest and input. The USDA also had 10 different tribal stakeholder listening sessions where more than 260 participants attended and provided feedback as well. So all that information was gathered up, and USDA has came up with some recommendations that's going to include all the USDA agencies working together to address climate in different ways. As far as NRCS, from NRCS perspective, we are the Private Lands Conservation Agency, so I can see some real great opportunities starting in 2022 with some of our programs. The agency's piloting different things this year in 10 different states, trying to learn some different things about practices that might have impacts on climate. And I anticipate with our program announcements in 2022, especially with EQIP and CSP, there'll be some opportunities related to climate. And really, when you start thinking about climate adaptation and mitigating some of those impacts, we have been looking at that for a number of years here in Oklahoma with soil health and regenerative agriculture. And I really think those practices and those management tools will continue to be vitally important. And just reviewing some of those, key things that we focus on is keeping the soil covered, maintaining a living root at all times, minimizing soil disturbance, integrating livestock in our operations where we can, and maximizing our diversity of our plants. So those are things that we've been working with landowners for a number of years, and I think will continue to be really, really important to help mitigate some of those impacts on climate. But I hope through our pilot activities, there'll be some different practices, some tweaking of practice standards, and be some opportunities for private landowners starting in 2022 in Oklahoma from NRCS perspective in some of our programs. So that's a quick update from NRCS. Look for more activities next year, and we anticipate some great opportunities to partner and leverage some things here in Oklahoma. So Carol, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Gary. And as you'll notice during our session today, you're going to hear a lot about partners and how we all work together. So at this time, I would like to introduce you to Mr. Clay Pope. Clay is with the USDA Southern Plains Climate Hub. Clay has a lot of things going on, webinars, podcasts, and so forth regarding climate change. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Clay.
Well, Carol, thank you very much. And I appreciate the chance to come and visit a little bit about, climate change and agriculture and some of the things that are going on and some of the approaches that we are working on at the Climate Hub. As Carol said, I work for the USDA Southern Plains Climate Hub. I'm actually a contractor working through an agreement with NRCS, primarily on outreach and information. But when you look at what we try to do at the hub, it is kind of like its name implies. All the different USDA agencies are kind of the spokes on the wheel. And like Gary said, each agency has its responsibility and the focus that it has on climate change. Our job is to help to support the efforts of those agencies, to help support efforts on research, help maybe take the pieces of the puzzle when it comes to climate change that all the different agencies have, kind of bring them together at the table and see what pieces are missing. And then with our partners at the Agricultural Research Service, in fact, the hub is located at the Grazing Lands Laboratory at Fort Reno, at El Reno. It's where we are located, even though we do cover the 3 states and work with the other agencies. We are located at an ARS facility as our headquarters. We try to work to help make sure that we try to answer those questions, help work with our sister agencies to see about coming up with strategies to help not just producers, but also our rural communities deal with some of the challenges of climate change. Because, I think if you look at the past year, everything is pretty much played to course. If you listen to the guys with the crystal ball, if you hear the folks who've been dealing with climate change and climate change predictions for years now, have said when you talk about the Southern Plains and climate change, basically the extreme weather we've always had in this part of the world is just basically getting shot full of steroids. You know, the rains, we're not necessarily going to see changes in the amount of precipitation that we have, but the rains are going to come in at different times. And when we do have those rainstorms, they're going to have a tendency to be more violent. You know, the 100-year flood becomes the 50-year flood. The 50-year flood becomes, you know, just another bad spring storm or summer storm, as the case may be. You know, you look at some of the changes that we're seeing now, which adds to the unpredictability of our weather patterns. You know, you think back to February and the extreme cold situation that we saw moving further south into Texas. We've all heard the stories, the impact that the cold had on the energy grid, things like wellheads for natural gas freezing up, intake pumps on nuclear power plants failing, challenges that really you didn't ever anticipate seeing this far south. But because of the changes that we're seeing in that case, a change with the jet stream that's actually being impacted by changes in the overall ambient temperature of the earth, because we're seeing that gradual increase in climate that allowed that cold weather to spill over from the Arctic and have that blast move so far south and cause the challenges that it did. And the ironic thing is, if you take that time that we saw the cold weather in February out of the equation, we actually had an above normal temperature range this past winter. And so again, those extremes and the impact that they can have is something that we have to be prepared for and that we want to try to work with folks on. Again, this summer, we're seeing unusual moisture. It was the latest ever in the history of Oklahoma that we saw our first 100-degree day in this state. Of course, now we're getting the nice muggy weather because the heat has shifted a little bit again coming back in, and we've had so much moisture that again we're seeing conditions that for a lot of Oklahoma, especially west of I-35, really are a little bit unusual because it's not the dry heat, it's actually something more that you would see as you move further east because of the amount of precipitation that we've had. So we have all these challenges out there, so we have to be prepared for it. And one of the things I always like to say that, you know, even today, while you have this evidence in front of you, there's folks that are still hesitant to believe in climate change. Well, you know, I've never seen a person yet who doesn't believe in droughts and floods. And that's really what we're talking about as far as strategies with our communities, with agriculture producers, is coming up with ideas and options to try to help deal with extreme weather events. And one of the nice things about production agriculture is a lot of the same things that we want people to do to adapt to climate change are the exact same things that we want them to do to help mitigate some of climate change's root causes, trying to lower the amount of methane and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere so we don't have as much greenhouse gas trapping that. And basically you do that largely by trying to get the carbon cycle a little bit back more in balance. You know, I'm working with Carol. I had the opportunity to talk to some kids this last week at the Jones Academy at one of their STEM camps. And one of the things I pointed out is that when you talk about climate change, we're just talking about taking a natural cycle and speeding it up. You know, I always compare it to the Dust Bowl. Erosion is a natural process that in the 1930s we simply sped up. And that's what we've done with the carbon cycle. Climate change has always happened. It always will happen. But by pulling up fossil fuels primarily, burning them, we've taken that carbon that should have stayed in the ground a little bit longer, brought it up, sped up the process of the carbon cycle, and that's having impact as far as then the weather and the greenhouse effect, and then we see the results from that. So that's something that we need to work with on trying to get that back into balance. And one of the best ways to do that is through photosynthesis, also by reducing emissions. One of the best ways to do that, especially from an agriculture standpoint, this discussion of soil health and regenerative agriculture, because by minimizing or eliminating tillage in our production agriculture systems, we actually are burning less diesel, so we're not putting as much emissions into the atmosphere to begin with, and we're then sequestering a lot of that CO2 that plants are pulling out of the atmosphere and putting back into the ground through that process in the form of organic matter. You know, Oklahoma State a few years back said as much as 0.5 metric ton of carbon dioxide per acre per year would be sequestered under no-till practices on average in the state of Oklahoma on winter wheat ground. And that didn't include cover crops into the mix. So clearly there's some things that we can do there. And the good news is those are the same practices that also help us better prepare for extreme rain weather events, whether you're talking about droughts or floods. Because if you can increase organic matter, you're also doing things that help improve the water holding capacity of the soil. And by having that soil covered, you're also controlling runoff. And so, you know, you're holding on to more moisture. You're making sure that that water stays in place when it hits there. You know, I talk about erosion. And that's something that, you know, everybody can put their arms around because everybody's familiar with soil erosion in this part of the world. even with the good work that we do in this state, we've ran the numbers. For every pound of wheat we grow in Oklahoma, we lose 3 pounds of soil on average. That's with some of the best conservation work in the world being done on the ground in this state. We've got more that we need to do. And this is a way to help us do things to help improve the bottom line of agriculture producers, help do things to reduce input costs, help better prepare for extreme weather, and help address climate change as well as possible. Now, Gary had talked a little bit about some of the programs that are out there. Obviously, if you can tell, soil health is one of the big focuses that we have on the Climate Hub. The idea of trying to help support NRCS and our partners in the Conservation Partnership, the local districts, the commission, some of the other organizations, and trying to spread the word on the importance of soil health and regenerative agriculture, again, to help us address climate change, both from an adaptation and mitigation standpoint, and also as a way to help producers' bottom lines improve and deal with some other challenges in production agriculture. Another issue that we work quite a bit on is prescribed fire. You think about this year, you think about the amount of moisture that we've had and what that means for the growing season. It's great for forage for livestock. Don't get me wrong, as a cattle producer, I'm tickled to death, that we've had the moisture that we have. But the challenges that we've seen the last few years is that we have been seeing rains coming in July and August that we traditionally haven't seen in a lot of Oklahoma. And what that means is that you have more vegetation that's growing out there. That also means we get into the wintertime, it dies off. You get into the spring, you've got a perfect recipe for wildfires. One of the good ways to handle that is to reduce that wildfire load. Prescribed fire is one of the best ways to do that. It also helps us with invasive species like the eastern red cedar and thistle and other challenges that we're seeing as far as pasture health. Also helps us improve wildlife habitat. So that's one of the things that we push as well. Infrastructure. Gary had mentioned PL 566, the upstream flood control program. It's great to see that this is getting some interest on Capitol Hill again, and that we're seeing some interest in the program, because that really is the first, in my opinion, first climate change mitigation program that USDA started, and they didn't even realize that was what they were doing, but trying to control the impacts of extreme flooding, while at the same time holding on to that water, in some cases providing additional water sources for communities. That's something that I think is critical that we work on that. The programs like EQIP and CSP, that we have that out there. I'd mentioned prescribed fire, other areas of infrastructure that I won't get into a whole lot, but definitely hardening our system to extreme weather. I'd mentioned wildfire and the challenges with the electrical system, because unfortunately it's been, there's been instances of high wind events that have popped insulators on electrical lines that have helped add to some of the wildfire challenges out there. Hopefully through infrastructure and with our partners at the Rural Utility Service, there may be some assistance coming there. One thing too that we're really pushing is this concept of planning. And I know from a hub standpoint, talking about partners and possible ways that we could work together. NRCS actually has a climate adaptation workbook that is available, that we've been talking with folks about, trying to work with NRCS a little bit to get some of our district conservationists and other folks to look at it as a tool to help producers better prepare for extreme weather. We'd love to have this conversation if any of the nations are interested in that, and talking about how that could be something they could look at for their own operation. Also working with NRCS and others on drought planning, extreme weather planning, cold weather planning. Those are some of the things that we would like to explore a little bit more. Carol mentioned we had a lot of things that are going on. Field days have kind of been one of our bread and butter that we've done here at the Hub, and helping get that information out to producers, especially in partnership again with NRCS. COVID kind of knocked that into the head a little bit. We actually are trying to get out a little bit now. We've got an event scheduled for next week at Loyal, Oklahoma on August the 3rd. We've also are working with OTAC on doing a virtual event later on this spring. We actually started a virtual demo farm this last year during COVID, when we couldn't get out and do events, to try to help get some information out to folks about some of the things that producers could do. We took it at one farmer, we followed him from wheat harvest last year all the way through planting cover crops, putting cattle out on those covers, terminating the covers, putting in his wheat crop, grazing the wheat pasture, moving all the way to harvesting wheat again this summer. We hope to keep that going. We've had some pretty good responses on that, and have that virtual operation out there. We're going to start another one, or we have started another one on a producer who's taking land out of CRP and bringing it back into production using soil health practices to tell that story as well. We have a podcast series. If any of you are interested in being on the podcast, we're always looking for guests. but we encourage you to check that out. We try to put at least one podcast out a month. And then we have partnerships with NOAA, with the state climatologists, and with folks with the National Weather Service to periodically put out podcasts about weather conditions. We have other videos. Again, if you're interested in being part of that project, we'd love to have you come on to our video program. We're doing more education efforts, or we're hoping to, if COVID again lets us come out of the bunker, so to speak. We actually made a presentation last week to the Oklahoma Ag in the Classroom folks at Edmond. And as I mentioned, Carol had us at the Jones Academy, and we'd love to have the chance. We actually have some curriculum that we put together, again, in partnership with NRCS and with a group called the Soil Carbon Coalition on soil health that you can use for your classrooms. We also have rainfall simulators, tabletop simulators that we have available for folks to use in educational settings, or we'll come out with them. And then we have a rainfall simulator trailer similar to what NRCS and the Conservation Commission has that we're willing to come out and work with you on as well. We have a couple projects that we've kicked off with Oklahoma State University that you might be interested in. Oklahoma State is working with us. We're actually putting together using the NRCS Comet Planner tool, which is a computer program that actually estimates how much carbon dioxide equivalent is reduced from conservation practices. Oklahoma State is working with NRCS in Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas with some money that we were able to come up with to put together what the climate change impact has been of all conservation title programs since the passage of the last Farm Bill in Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas to come up with those numbers. We actually did some limited research all that already in partnership with Kansas and Oklahoma, looking at priority watersheds for water quality, where there was water quality success using some of these practices. We went behind them, used the Comet Planner number, and came up with what the climate change impact was on those practices that were put in place primarily to address non-point source pollution. OSU is going to build off of that and actually do that for all conservation programs throughout the region. We're excited to see what those numbers look like, because I think we're going to find out there's a lot of good work that farmers and ranchers are doing that, quite frankly, they're not getting credit for just because nobody was looking. And so we're excited to work with Oklahoma State on that. OSU is also working with us, and we're helping them on a program on carbon credits. If you've heard a lot, there's a lot of talk about carbon credit markets. We played around with that a little bit in Oklahoma. But one of the challenges is right now nationwide, it's kind of a Wild West situation. OSU, working with the people who, Dr. Shannon Farrell primarily, who does a lot of the work on oil and gas leases and wind leases. He's taken on this project to try to come up with some of the model leases that have come out to producers and put together some fact sheets on what people need to look for in a carbon credit contract or any ecosystem services contract, and then also some questions that you need to ask, just the same way that you would with an oil and gas lease, a pipeline easement, anything like that. You know, what do you need to do? What's some of the boilerplate language that you need to look at? What are some questions that you need to ask? And who do you need to bring in the discussion? Like an attorney, your financial advisor, whoever it might be. If you're leasing land, how does that work? Those are some of the things that we're working with Oklahoma State on, and we're excited about that project as well. Basically, that's a real fast run through on some of the things that we're doing at the Hub. Again, we encourage you to check out our podcast. We actually have a separate site off of the Hub. You can link them through the Hub website, but it's called the Southern Plains Perspective. If you're interested in our blogs, our podcasts, and our videos, we have that information online at the Southern Plains Perspective. Just Google that, or you can go through the Hub website. Again, we'd love to partner with anyone. We're mentioning the podcasts, the videos, other things that we might be able to work together on. We're just excited to have the conversation and glad to be part of the discussion today. So with that, Carol, I'll happy to answer any questions anyone has to once we're done.
Okay, thank you very much. Clay, do we have any questions for Clay? If no one does, then if you have them, just send us an email and we'll make sure that you get an answer back from any of our speakers today. So moving on the agenda, I'm going to share with you some information about the T-scan units that came into Oklahoma. Clay mentioned that a little bit earlier. So Troy's going to bring up a PowerPoint. I think my PowerPoint is not going to take long, but there's some important things that I would like to share with you. And the T-scan unit is the acronym, and in the government, we all have acronyms. This is the tribal soil climate analysis unit. And what happened was they realized we have a lot of tribal trust land, and we haven't been collecting important data on those tribal trust lands. So what they did, there was an agreement between NRCS, the BIA, and having the same common objectives of building communication, sustaining our natural resources on Indian lands. We were very fortunate here in Oklahoma. There were 3 tribes selected for these T-scan units: Cheyenne and Arapaho tribe, Cherokee Nation, and Choctaw Nation. These T-scan units had to be 150 miles apart, and the main purpose on those, I'll just briefly touch on, is installing these units allowed us to collect and monitor data. Some of the things that we were interested in collecting is valuable in planting times, nutrient application, good times to harvest, drought, extreme weather, and extreme temperatures that maybe not impact also the soil, but also livestock. Excuse me. And then also one of the main things was to promote STEM among our youth. So with that, this project, the 3 projects, was definitely a joint effort. Going first, our first installation was the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribe, installed August 6, 2019. When I say this was a joint effort, you'll see a lot of people in these photos that you will see throughout, is that all 3 of the tribes assisted and came together to help each other get these units installed. The Cherokee Nation was installed October the 23rd. And when we installed the Cheyenne and Arapaho, it was 107 degrees. When we got up October 3rd to do the Cherokee Nation at Bull Hollow, then we were dealing with strong winds and cold. So just giving you a little snapshot of things that we did to install these units. And so then the 3rd tribe, we did let our crew take a break to eat, but then our 3rd installation went in at the Choctaw Nation on October 29th. The environment was totally different here. We had rain and cold, but it didn't defer our efforts to get this unit installed. We also had soil scientists join us from Kansas and Arkansas in this project. So this is the Choctaw Nation, and I'm going to lead in to, in the next slides, just showing you, it was kind of grueling, but it was so important project to get done and on the ground. One of the main purposes for us was to promote STEM among American Indian youth. And one of these units at the Choctaw Nation was implemented at Jones Academy. So as far as I know, Oklahoma is the first state to be able to actually hold some training for our students in the field of STEM. On July 19th, we had a campfire webinar with high school students. These high school students came across the 10.5 counties of the Choctaw Nation. And then the next day, on July the 20th, we actually had the opportunity to do some training with the students there at Jones Academy. The top picture is the T-scan unit that was implemented and placed there at Jones Academy. And we're sharing with them the importance of data that's being collected, the temperatures in the ground, weather conditions, humidity, all of that. And we'll also stress to the students and being able to extrapolate that data and put it into reports that benefit our producers and tribes across the nation. In the second photo here, we also divided the students up to do some soil health and rainfall demonstrations. And then on the next slide, you will see that we continued, the Jones Academy provided a great environment to be able to do this and practice social distancing by dividing the groups up. There were four gentlemen that went all the way down to Hawthorne, Oklahoma, to work with these students. Clay Pope, that you met earlier today, Greg Scott, he's with the Oklahoma Conservation Commission. Greg is down here in the photo at the bottom with Steve Osball. He's an NRCS state soil scientist. In the top picture, it's Clay. It's a good picture of Clay's back. Sorry about that, Clay. But we did realize on the camp that started this week, the weather conditions were a little hot down there. So we moved some of the sessions inside the gym there at Jones Academy. And then as we rotated students, we also rotated speakers. This is Greg and Steve Allspaw doing additional presentation inside the gym. And then in the other photo is Greg Scott with Oklahoma Commission. He's also a retired NRCS soil scientist, was be able to break the students out in smaller groups and demonstrate the importance of soil health, stressing the fact that the students are aware that the health of our soil is just as important as water. This is a second shot from the front of the T-scan unit there at Choctaw Nation Academy, and then again another shot inside the gym. I wanted to share this information with you. You will be getting emails from me in the near future. We want to work with all the tribes of Oklahoma. We know many of you have conservation camps in the summer, and hopefully next year we will be in full swing of being able to hold those. NRCS and the Oklahoma Tribal Conservation Advisory Council has always been a proud sponsor of those conservation camps and hope that we can continue in the next year. I'll be working with my team that went down there. One of the gentlemen I failed to introduce, Troy, if you'll go back a couple of slides, was Colin Walden. Colin Walden, he's with NRCS. There he is in the green shirt over here. He's our NRCS state rangeland specialist. So this is a preview of opportunities to come on how we can work with our students using data that is being extracted from the T-scan unit with different tribes and maybe just virtual math solutions using the T-scan unit. So I'll be reaching out to you. Many of you get emails from me all the time on the curriculum to do this, and we're always open to take speakers like this from our partners and join you as we take the opportunity to educate our students in the field of STEM. We all know preserving our lands for future generations is important to all the tribes. And we're all aware that these kiddos you see in these pictures today, taking care of our land and preserving our natural resources in the future is going to be in their hands. So thank you very much for me being able to share this project with you. And of course, you'll be getting all the data and additional information. And as always, many of you get emails from me now. So we'll be looking at how we can utilize the data from these T-scan units to give some projects to youth across all the tribes of Oklahoma on climate change and how important it is in the field of STEM. On our campfire with the students, we were very fortunate. We were able to bring speakers in and talk about careers in the field of STEM. So with that being said, we're going to move on to the agenda. One of our speakers at the campfire that night was Mr. Troy Marshall. Troy is with the USDA National Agriculture Statistics Service. And at this time, I'm going to introduce Troy so he can share with you the resources that NASS has available for the tribes here in Oklahoma. Troy.
You bet. Thank you, Carol. So I'm going to share a little bit of a presentation with you. I know that we're talking a lot about climate change, soil health, and then the feral swine. But one of the things that I think everybody kind of talked about as you listen to Scott and Lisa and even Carol and Clay, you heard the word data a lot. Data is a big part of trying to show the need. If you're trying to push something through or find a baseline to something, data is usually the common factor to be able to put that pieces together. So fortunately, I'm with USDA NASS. So NASS is National Ag Statistics Service. And that's what we deal in is data. So we're the official data collection for USDA. So we collect statistics on production, inventory, value, and even demographics. So annually, we put over 400 reports out every year. But probably the biggest one that we do, and what I'll spend most of my time on today, is the Census of Agriculture. And it's done every 5 years. So what is a census? Well, it's a complete count of all of America's farms and ranches and the people that operate them. Well, that's easier said than done. When you start thinking about trying to come up with a list of every known farmer in the U.S., that's a daunting task. How do we come about and do that? Well, we work with a lot of different partner agencies. That's another key word that you've heard a lot from this presentation today is partners. USDA has a lot of great sister agencies that tie in with us, but also some different state partners as well and state organizations. One of those strong partners that on outside of USDA agencies has been for us here in Oklahoma has been OTAC, the Oklahoma Tribal Advisory Council. So they've done a great job of putting us working with different tribes in Oklahoma and making sure that we work together to help count every farm in Oklahoma. So when we start developing those lists, we work with different partners to gain that, different outside organizations to come through and get those names. But we also work with potential farmers. So to be able to come up with a farm, you have to start with a potential farm. So there may be a breed list that you are a part of, a registry that we might tap into to be able to get, or an organization list that we may have that's deemed around agriculture. We may tap into those groups to help us obtain names that are associated with agriculture. And then we will survey them to see, hey, we think that you're agriculture. Here's a questionnaire. Help us fill out to see if you do qualify. So that kind of brings up a good point. What do we consider to qualify as a farm for USDA's definition? Well, since 1974, that definition has been any place which $1,000 worth of agriculture goods is produced or sold, or normally sold in a census year. Don't get too hung on the back part of that, but basically that means if you have $1,000 worth of goods that are being produced, you're considered a farm by these terms. So if you think about that, that's not really a whole lot of money when it comes to agriculture goods. If you had a cattle or some goats and some chickens, or even a backyard garden, if you're selling things out of it, would be able to produce $1,000 worth of goods that are normally sold. So we collect information about that. Most recently, the data that we collect is from the 2017 census. We collected that information starting the end of 2017 in through 2018, and then we released that data on April 11th, 2019. That is a little bit later than what we normally would release. Usually we would release that in February, but we did have some furlough going on during that time, so it did delay that. Massive amounts of data comes out when we look at this. 6.4 million data points nationwide when we first release it. Since then, we've added a bunch more data from that, where we twist and turn the data a little bit more, looking at it a little different. And I'll show you some examples of that. Nationwide, the response rate was about 71.5%. We try to target 80%, which is very high in terms of data collection. Most universities, when they do a survey, they think, they term a good response about 20 to 25%. So we are greatly above that level for response rate. As you can see, Oklahoma was a higher response rate with a 72.4%. So the next few slides, I will admit, I'm going to go through pretty quick. It's just giving you some examples of data, but what I really want to get to is on the back side of some of these general slides. But you can kind of see the number of farms. You can see that going down. We're currently at 78,531 farms in the 2017 census. You can see the land in farms didn't change a whole lot when it comes through with that, down slightly. So just kind of giving an idea of what that kind of looks like. Another way to look at data is by value of production. Value production is a key piece, especially when you're looking at importance. Oklahoma produces roughly around 7.5 billion with a B, dollars in agriculture goods back in 2017. So this was a really big increase, an increase from the 2012 census. So it's important to see that come through. On the left side of this, you can see those number of farms at each one of those categories, and then you can see the contributions to those value of production that is produced here in Oklahoma. Again, I'm going to go through these kind of quick because I want to get to the back side of this and what I really want to talk about. But you can see all this looking at it a little differently, looking at it by county. Looking about location, you can kind of see where that concentration is out in Texas County. You can see those concentrations in the Panhandle of Texas and a few of the other states. Specifically looking at California through the valley, you can see where that concentration is across the U.S. The table on the right shows those top counties that we have here in Oklahoma and the value of sales for each one of those counties in 2017. When we look at it by breaking it down from crops to livestock, you can kind of see we were about an 80-20% split in 2017, where 80% of our value of production came from livestock and 20% came from crops. Now that will vary from year to year, as you can see. A lot of that is due to prices at that point in time. If you think back to 2017, crop prices were a little lower then, and livestock prices were much higher then. So that's kind of where that split pulls in from those years. When we break down and just look at Oklahoma itself, by commodity, you can see 50% of our total sales, value of sales, comes from cattle alone. So when we're looking at our top commodities, based off of value of sales, cattle's number one, hogs and pigs are number two, poultry was number three, and then we get into the crops for number four, and those are lumped together. You can see we do separate cotton out separately, and that comes in and as we go down the list. Where I really wanted to get through is, remember I talked about demographics. We can actually take our data and turn it based off of how producer reports or self-identifies for demographics. So when we're specifically looking for American Indian, Alaska Native, we can look and rank based off of states for those producers. So in Oklahoma, the number of operations that had at least one or more American Indian noted on that, self-identified, was just under 14,000, and that ranks number one in the U.S. When we look at Oklahoma itself, you can see, comparing year over year, you can see a large increase in 2017. So, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, that means that there was a bunch of people, a bunch of American Indians that got into agriculture. Not necessarily. What that means is that we did a better job of coming in and identifying those operators and making sure they're being accounted for on the list. And that starts with partnerships. I talked a little bit about that before. Like I mentioned, OTAC, partnering with the various tribes to make sure that we are accounting for all those producers that are a part of those tribes, and making sure that they're self-identifying themselves as being American Indian producer as well. So when we take that and twist it around a little bit, look at it a little differently and look down by the size of farm, you can kind of see that the average or the most farms with an American Indian on them or identified as American Indian were between 50 and 179 acres. So kind of that average size farm for that. So when we go through and look at this a little bit further, some of the other things that we can look at is age. Age is always a hot topic because age has been increasing over the years. But when we look at the average age of all farmers in Oklahoma is around 57. But when we look at the average age of American Indian producers in Oklahoma, it's just under 53. So you can kind of see where starting clockwise, starting here at 25, we can see that you can rotate all the way around to the other side and account for which level those are. So of course, our largest level is going to be that 55 to 64 years old. And that holds true with all producers in Oklahoma as well. One of the other hot topics that I always try to look at is internet. Internet is a hot item in Oklahoma, specifically for tribes, because it is something that there has been some different grants for. We do ask that on our census of ag. Now, the thing that I have to footnote this is, it is only for those that are agriculture producers. So this is only agriculture producers that have been reported in this. So you can kind of see what some of those percentages are, but it is a good baseline because we can get that information at a local level. So where do you find all this? Well, our website is www.nas.usda.gov. And there in the center, you can see I have a census tab highlighted where you can go in and see censuses. And as you can see, there's a drop-down box here that'll go all the way back to the first census, which was in 1840. So you can see that information all the way back off of our website. So there's a lot of data out there. So what do you really look for? Well, one of the things that, when I'm talking with tribes, one of the things I usually refer to is what we call our race, ethnicity, and gender profiles. And a lot of the information that were on the slides that I just showed came from these profiles. And here's the one that is at the national level. Well, we produce these at the county level. You can actually see the number of producers at that level, different facts about each one, all the way through looking at both sides of this page. So it's very helpful to be able to find, and it's there on our website. So as I wrap up, what's next? Well, we're already in the works for preparing for the 2022 Census of Agriculture. So one of the things that I'll ask you to consider is becoming a partner with NASS. If we haven't already done that, we want to make sure that we're accounting for all agriculture producers and especially tribal producers as we move forward into the 2022 census. So we have a partner page on that same census page. where you can find all the updated information about what's going on with the 2022 census. We have different promotional items. But one of the things that I took a hypersnap of here that you can see on the screen is we do have a make sure that you're counted page. So if you didn't haven't been surveyed by an AS and you are a reporter or are a producer or know someone, or even if you're a tribe and wanted to make sure that you're accounting for all those tribal members, you can send this out, this location, and be signed up to be included in the 2022 Census of Agriculture. And then lastly, if you are signed up or have received that report, we really appreciate your responses. It is confidential. It does only go to us, and it only is used to put out for statistical formats. So make sure that you report when you receive those. Lastly is my contact information. I know some of that data is there's a lot of data there, so we can always help guide you through where some of that data is or what you need. So feel free to reach out to me and I could kind of walk you through some of that data or help you find what you're looking for. And maybe it is that you don't even know what you're looking for, but you have an idea that you have a need. We'll see if we can try to match up something that'll help you guide through with what you're looking for, what we can pair with you. So with that, I appreciate your time today. And Carol, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Troy. And the other thing I wanted to share with you is I get a lot of requests from tribes that are working on grants. Anytime you have that kind of question, you need the ag statistics to put in there, population, farming, that sort of thing, their educational grants for the tribe. Just send me or Troy an email, and you will be getting everybody's information tomorrow in a packet. So you've heard from a lot of partners this morning, and we saved our best partner for last, who's been very patient for us, is our sister agency, USDA Farm Service Agency. So joining us this morning is Janlyn Hanna and Maddie Allwine from FSA. So I'm going to turn it over to Janlyn to share some valuable information with you. As you all know, we had some disaster back in February, and the weather can change a lot here in Oklahoma, and it does have an impact on our animals and our crops. So Janlyn?
Good morning. Thank you, Carol, very much. Yes, me and Maddie are going to share some information today. As most of you may know, Farm Service Agency is kind of made up of two branches. We have our program branch and our loan branch. So Maddie's going to quickly go through some of the program aspects, and then I'll follow up with some of the loan items.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maddie Allwine. I'm doing outreach with the Oklahoma FSA. Real quickly, I just kind of wanted to go over some of our programs that we have to offer. Most of our programs are for disaster assistance. So we hope that you never need them, but if you do, we're here to help with you guys to help keep things afloat. One of our programs is the Livestock Indemnity Program, otherwise known as LIP. This will provide assistance to circumstance of livestock deaths in excess of normal mortality rates, or if your animal has been injured as a direct result of an eligible loss condition and they had to be sold at a reduced price. Our LFP is our Livestock Forage Disaster Program. This is for eligible livestock owners who are producers of grazed forage that have lost grazing forage due to a qualifying drought. This kind of comes in handy this time of year. So if we do go into a drought and you're in an eligible county with the drought, this might be a good resource for you guys to have as well. ELAP, this program covers losses due to adverse weather or loss of condition, including blizzards, disease, water shortages, or wildfires. And then PLIP, this is our new program that we have just recently came out with. This is our Pandemic Livestock Indemnity Program. This is for livestock and poultry that were depopulated from March 1st of 2020 through December 26th of 2020 due to insufficient processing access during the COVID-19 pandemic. The sign-up deadline for this is September 17th of 2021, and there's no payment limitation to this program. Although this program will only cover swine, chicken, and turkeys that were depopulated. Packers and contract growers are not eligible for this program. To apply for this one, you will just to apply for this one, you'll complete an FSA 620, and you can turn this into your local county office. And then we have the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program 2. This is the same program that was out, we've reopened this program, so there's nothing that's different from this one. It's just an immediate relief program to provide critical support to our farmers and ranchers to maintain the integrity of our food supply chain and ensure every American continues to receive and have access to the food that they need. This is currently an ongoing sign-up, and there's not yet a deadline. Quickly, here's some of our farm programs regarding crops. We have our emergency CRP, haying and grazing. And then we have our Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP, our non-insured crop assistance program, which provides financial assistance to producers of non-insurable crops. This is NAP. And then we have our ARC PLC program as well. And then another new program that we have just released is our PATH program. It provides relief to timber harvesting and timber hauling businesses that have experienced losses due to COVID-19. And this is just part of our USDA Pandemic Assistance for Producers initiative. This program is for probably just focus on producers on the eastern part of Oklahoma. Again, if you are interested in this program and would like to know more information on if you're eligible, your county offices will have the most up-to-date information and will be able to assist you with completing that application. And then for our loans, we just kind of have some emergency loans, and if you're in an emergency designated county, you may qualify for these. Our guaranteed loan program. This is for producers that may not meet the loan qualifications from a commercial lender, and the FSA will guarantee the loss up to 90 to 95%. Direct farm loans, these are farm loans that come directly from the FSA. So these are youth loans, ownership loans, operating loans, as well as our micro loans. The farm ownership loans have a loan maximum of $600,000 with up to a 40-year repayment term. And then our farm operating loans have a loan maximum of up to $400,000 with up to a 7-year repayment term. And both ownership and operating loans are available as a microloan, which has a loan maximum of $50,000. That loan would be great for beginning producers if they just want to get their toes wet and just kind of start off small and to build their operation. Then that is a good loan for them. Beginning producers are producers that have less than 10 years of experience. If you're interested in this, you'll just contact your farm loan manager in your specific county, and they'll be able to help get you started with the application process. And then this is where Janlyn jumps in. She has some information regarding the American Rescue Plan.
Thank you, Maddie. Again, I'm Janlyn Hanna. Right now I'm the acting SED with Oklahoma FSA. Normally my regular title is executive officer here, so I work mostly with just kind of doing some coordinating, some of our outreach and public affairs issues. So one of the programs that's very hot button right now, very active and out in the community, is about our American Rescue Plan Act. And so, as you know, this program is a payment program that is going to pay debt that was outstanding effective January 1st of 2021. And so all of the producers who were borrowers with us at that time, if they are registered in our system as being SDA, and those different groups are notated there. If you're a minority producer, not female, but minority producer, you would be eligible for participation in this payment. And so the payment, there's a lot of interest in the 120% of loan balance and what exactly that means. it's going to be paid towards your balance. So the 100% is going to be what was outstanding January 1st. And so the payment would effectively make a payment to write that balance off. The 20% is being sent to our borrowers to assist them with any tax concerns that they would have. So whether that means that the additional income would cause them to go into a different tax bracket, there will be tax payment associated with this payment. And so that 20% is to help offset kind of the tax ding that you would get because of the payment of that loan balance. Right now, there are several injunctions that are halting the payments of these programs. In Oklahoma, that doesn't mean so much to us. Oklahoma has the largest SDA borrower rate and the largest borrower rate in the country. And so it hasn't slowed us down in terms of right now, we're making all the calculations for this program. We have to calculate to ensure that the payment that we have in our system for the outstanding balance is proper. And so each week, the national office gives us a list of names, and we have several folks in the state who are working on those calculations to ensure they're correct. And so they go through and they do the math on that to make sure that everything matches up. And at that point, if it does, a letter is generated and sent to the borrower to offer them the opportunity to participate in this program. If the borrower agrees and would like to participate in the program, he or she will sign that agreement and return it to our office. If he or she wishes to not participate in the program, there's the opportunity to opt out on that letter as well. And so once we receive those back, we load those applications into the system, those agreements into the system, and at that point, the payment is waiting. So like I said, in Oklahoma, it's not as much of a concern because we're still working, we're still getting things prepped, just because we do have such a large borrower portfolio. Some of the other states have completed their calculations, and so they're just waiting for these injunctions to lift so that payments can be made. But for now, the administration is very confident that once these injunctions are lifted, that we will be proceeding as planned with these repayments. If you have any questions about the program, please reach out to me or to Maddie or to your local office, and we'd be happy to help you with those. If you applied for a loan with us and received it and closed the loan, any loan that closed after January 1 of 2021 is not going to be eligible. So as long as the loan closed before January 1st of 2021, it is eligible for this program. Whenever you applied, you didn't notate your race or ethnicity, you can contact the office and complete an AD 2047 form to update your race and ethnicity, and then we will apply that to your application. We do have to send those to the national office as a self-certification change, and at that point, it will trigger the loan to be filtered for calculation. So I know that there are different reasons. Perhaps someone either missed that opportunity to fill that portion out or didn't feel comfortable doing that at the time. So that's why they're making that allowance for changes. Other than that, that's kind of where we are on the program. Like I said, we're proceeding forward, getting everything prepared for the lift of those injunctions so we can make payments. But if there's any other questions about that, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Okay. Thank you very much, Janlyn and Maddie. You saw that we went through a lot of programs with the Farm Service Agency and a lot of acronyms. So we will be including that in the bundle of information that I'll send to Karen and the staff to send out to all those participants that joined us today. You'll have a contact list and phone number map from NRCS, as well as a listing for all the FSA offices here in Oklahoma. I just want to quickly thank my speakers, the speakers that joined us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Gary O'Neill, NRCS State Conservationist, to close us out. Gary?
Thank you, Carol. I appreciate it. And thank you all for letting us share some information. I do want to pass along something. Before COVID, we worked very closely with USDA leadership coming out and visiting with tribal leaders and getting very specific about some of our programs and assistance and finding what the needs might be and what programs might match. And since COVID, we can't really do that in person, but I would offer up if some of your tribal leaders want some more specific information about programs, like Carol said, FSA has a vast amount of programs. We have a lot of programs. Other agencies, RD and others, have different opportunities. We could set up a webinar through Carol, and we could do the same thing virtually where we could give you some more information. So we just barely touched on some of those programs this morning. Would love to give you more information if it's something specifically that a tribe might have interest in, and we could set something up to do that. So we provide that opportunity as well if it's something that would help the tribe. So we really value the partnership with our tribal partners, and think that we have some great programs that can offer them some assistance in the area of natural resources and agriculture and the environment and things like that. So would offer that. So again, appreciate the opportunity, and one last opportunity for any questions, or we do that. But if not, Carol will close it down, and appreciate everyone speaking and sharing some time today.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. I did get an email question, and I can answer that now. The first week at Jones Academy were high school students from the 10.5 counties of the Choctaw Nation. This week, the camp was 5th grade through 8th grade in those same counties of the Choctaw Nation. So, Karen, we're going to turn it back to you. We tried to stay very close on time. We did a pretty good job, or made it as close as we possibly can, covering so much information. So with that, I hope everyone stays healthy and safe, and thank you again.
Thank you, Carol. And we do actually have one question for Clay. Clay, are you still on the line?
I think he is.
You're
Clay?
muted. Hold on.
There we go.
Awesome. Okay, so we do have one question, Clay, and it's they want to know what the name of your podcast is or how they can find it.
Southern Plains Podcast is the name of the podcast. Just Google Southern Plains Perspective or Southern Plains Podcast, and you'll find it. Southern Plains Podcast on Lisbon is where the podcast is loaded. Southern Plains Perspective will give you a link to our podcast, to our videos, and to our weekly blog as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Clay. Other than that, I don't see any other questions on our end. As long as you guys don't have any questions on your end.
They could email me too, and my information was on the PowerPoint, because I do a tribal email blast when Clay sends me all of the opportunities. So I can also add them to that if they'd like to be added. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys all for joining us today. We really appreciate you guys presenting. Our next session today is going to be at 1 o'clock for the information technology. So we hope you guys will join us there. So with that, thank you guys all so much, and you guys have a good day.